Good afternoon, grade 12 learners. Welcome to today's English First Additional Language lesson. My name is Marina Seeley, and this lesson is brought to you by Gauteng Department of Education in collaboration with Saibono Discovery Center. Today, we will be looking at the revision of paper 3 and more specifically, the transactionals. More specifically, the longer transactionals. So let's take a look at the layout of the paper. It will seem familiar to you if you'd written your paper 3 in November's examination for grade 11. English First Additional will be a paper 3. The marks will be a total of 100. And if we put that in perspective, you write 3 papers, paper 1, which counts 80, paper 2, which counts 70, and then paper 3, which counts 100. Now, if you weigh the 3 papers, you'll see that this one is actually quite an important one that you actually have quite a bit of control over. The time is 2.5 hours, and in that, you have to do 3 questions from the 3 different sections, in other words, 1 in each section. Let's take a look at the instructions and information. As I said in the previous session, we are very often ignorant of what happens in the list of information and instructions. So this question paper consists of 3 sections. Section A is the essay, which we dealt with last week. Then a section B, the longer transactional texts for 30. Section C, the shorter transactional texts for 20, and that gives you the total of 100. You have to answer 1 question from each section. You have to write in the language in which you are being assessed. And you have to start each section on a new page. You must plan using a mind map, diagram, flowchart, keywords, whatever works for you. You need to show proof of editing and proofreading, and the plan must appear before each text. All planning must be clearly indicated as such, and it is advisable to draw a line through all the planning. You are strongly advised to spend approximately 80 minutes on section A, 40 minutes on section B, and 30 minutes on section C. Ladies and gentlemen, this is an extremely important element, because very often we get caught having completed the first section, and then we don't have enough time for the second and the third section. And at the end, it's very sad if you lose 20 marks or 30 marks because you could not complete the last section. Number the answers correctly according to the numbering system used in the question paper. Give each response a suitable title or heading. And in this case, you're going to use the topic, friendly letter or formal letter or letter to the press. Do not consider the title or the heading when doing a word count. Write neatly and legibly. Writing neatly actually just helps you get the marker on your side. Remember that they mark a lot of papers. Your teacher marks a lot of papers. And if she comes across a paper that's neat and well thought through and well executed, then it's easier to read, and we are more positive, aren't we? In today's lesson, we will focus on section B, the transactional text or the longer transactional text. The following categories will appear in your question paper. 2.1 category A, 2.2 category B, or 2.3 category C. Now let's take a closer look at category A. You might get the friendly letter, the formal letter. That could be a request, a letter of application, a business letter, a letter of complaint, a letter of sympathy, a letter of congratulations, or a letter of thanks. You may get a curriculum vitae and a covering letter, and remember this is asked as a combination. So if you include your CV or curriculum vitae, you have to include the covering letter as well. The formal and informal letter to the press, the email. Let's take a look at category B. You might get a review of any sort, reviewing food at a restaurant, reviewing a movie, reviewing a novel. So it could actually be any kind of review. The newspaper article, a magazine article, the agenda and minutes of meeting, and here again it is asked as a combination. Formal and informal reports, and an obituary. I wonder if anyone can detect a little spelling error. Category C, the dialogue, the written interview, the written formal or informal speech. Let's take a look at the requirements. Candidates, that's now you, will be expected to answer only one question in this section. 4 questions will be set, at least 1 and a maximum of 2 from each of the given categories. Choose only one longer transactional text from the ones given. So let's just recap. You do not have to do one from each category. You choose the one that you would like to write. So in section B, ultimately you will be answering one question. The body of your response should be between 120 and 150 words in length. Extremely important that you try and keep to the number of words, keep within that 120 to 150 words. If it's too short, then obviously there's not enough to award marks. If it's too long, it becomes tedious. And remember, the more you write, the more mistakes you make. So try and avoid that. But do not be mathematical in your counting of the words, because the markers certainly won't, unless they realize this is far too long, and then they would start counting. But be careful of that. It's also a very good way to train your brain to write within a specific number of words. Write down the number and the heading of the text you have chosen. For example, 2.1, friendly letter. Do you see, you don't have to write out the instructions or the topic. As long as you indicate this is the friendly letter, or you have selected the dialogue, or you have selected the obituary, then that is what you write down. Your longer transactional text will be assessed according to a 30-mark rubric. Now, I'm sure that you've met the rubric before. I'm certain in grade 10 and 11, your teachers have marked your essays or your transactionals with a rubric. Pay particular attention to format. We'll be taking quite a in-detail look at format today, language, and register. Remember to plan, edit, and proofread your text. Clearly indicate planning and cross it out before submitting. And the reason for that is if you do planning and you fail to draw a line through it or indicate it as a first draft or a planning, then especially in the final exams, it becomes quite a problem when the marker has already marked the planning because it hasn't been indicated. And then there's a time loss because then obviously they have to mark the final one as well. So please be careful and make sure that you indicate your planning and your final. And while we are on that topic, please, there's nothing like a final draft. It is just a final, or you can say final presentation if you really like. Let's take a look at the letters in category A. Informal letters or friendly letters are usually written to people who are close to the writer. In other words, they're close to you. For example, you might write a letter to your parents or a close relative or a friend. You need to know what the purpose of the letter is, and the instructions will lead you to know what exactly you need to write about. They are mainly written to express an emotion, for example, to congratulate or sympathize or advise, amongst other things. What style would you use? When we talk about style, we refer to either the informal style, and that is when you write a letter to your friend. But please remember, this is still formal writing, and we are not saying that you have to write in academic language, but you cannot write slang and colloquial language. Slang is gonna, wanna, ain't, all those Americanized words that you love to use when you speak. You're not allowed to use that. It doesn't look good, even if it's for your friend who actually understands you. And then colloquial language, I'm sure that you've met that early on, grade 7, grade 8, grade 9 already. Colloquial language would be language that is used in a specific area. And if you use those words, you actually exclude people. Okay, can't, won't, isn't, right? Please don't use that. Rather say cannot, will not, shall not. Contractions these days are regarded as an error. So it will be negative on your results. Innovations such as SMS language, LOL, those kind of things. Okay, we are a bit behind the times. SMS language or WhatsApp language, whatever platform you are used to. And then very important, foul language. Foul language refers to profanities, swearing, literally. And that is absolutely unacceptable. And if that happens in your pieces, whether the essay or the transactionals, they will mark you down because it's unacceptable. Let us not go there. Right, what is the format? Now, first of all, the informal letter has only one address, and that is the sender's address. So in other words, if you are writing a letter to your mother and father, it will be your address. Or if it's you're writing to an uncle wherever, it is just one address, and that is your address. No punctuation should occur anywhere in your address. No abbreviations in the address except for P.O. Box if postal address is used. Use either a residential or a post office address. Please don't use both of them. Right, then the area postal code must be included. But let me tell you a little secret. Nobody who's marking your friendly letter is going to check whether the address is legitimate. So create one. I'm not sure that any one of you has ever written a true, honest letter that you had to post. It's a lovely thing, but there it is. But include a postal code at the end. Date must be immediately added after the address, and it should be written in full. In other words, today is 12 February 2024, so that is how you should write it out. The salutation will be the formal with the use of the first or a familiar name. For example, Dear Piano. And the ending or the closing will be informal, such as your best friend, yours sincerely, your sincere friend, you can add that, and your favorite niece. Those are only examples. So let's take a look at a postal address and a residential address. Right, so if you decide to use a postal address, and you are more than welcome to do that, P.O. Box 897, Pretoria 0001, that is your area code, and then the date. It doesn't have to be in capital letters, it doesn't really matter, except for P.O. Box should be capitalized. Then your residential address, and this is very important, the number, the name, and then street, lane, boulevard. So 1880 Mandela Street, the town or the city, the code, and then the date. Let's take a look at possible greetings or salutations. Salutation follows right after a skip line on the left side. So your address is top right, you skip a line, and then your salutation. The most common form of greeting in a friendly letter is Dear Lekhetu or Dear Mom, but please do not punctuate with a colon between dear and the name of the recipient. We see that so often. It is just dear friend. No punctuation whatsoever in the salutation. No comma or full stop after the greeting. Right, so an example of a salutation is you've got your address, residential address, number, name, street on the right, Johannesburg 1502, the date, leave a line open, then it is the salutation, Dear Mom. The body of the letter. After you've written the salutation, you leave a line open before you start the body of the letter. The body of the letter usually consists of 3 paragraphs. And it's easier to work it that way because in the opening paragraph, you introduce what you want to write about. In the second paragraph, you elaborate. And in the third paragraph, you bring together. Start each paragraph against the margin and leave a line open between each paragraph. Each paragraph should contain different information. State in the first paragraph the reason for writing the letter. You don't write, Dear Mom, how are you? I am fine. That is so boring. Be creative. Remember, this is still creative writing. The other 2 paragraphs expand on the reason for the letter. So the first paragraph introduces the reason for the letter. The second paragraph expands on the reason for the letter. And then the concluding paragraph is usually short and it rounds off the letter. Avoid ending your letter with give my regards to all at home or best wishes to your family, but rather include regards in the body of the letter. Let's take a look at a good ending. Now, after you've written your final paragraph, you leave a line open and then you start the ending next to the left-hand side of the margin. In other words, right against the left. That sounds weird. Right against the left. The ending may take several forms depending on the relationship with the recipient. Yours should start with capital letters, but sincerely should have small letters and no other punctuation should be used. Let's take a look at an example. One's surname is unnecessary if one writes to a family member or a close friend. They know who you are, so you don't have to include your surname. For example, yours sincerely, Tebe. Now, this is a very good activity or a very good checklist. I'm sure that this will also or was already shared with you. If not, it is a good thing to work out a checklist for yourself. In other words, let's take a look at the structure. Do you have the sender's address? Yes or no? The salutation. Is it correct? Yes or no? Let's say the salutation is there, but there's an error in there. You will write in the column, in the comments column. Then the ending content. Has this letter actually answered the question? In other words, the purpose of the letter. Has that been achieved? Is there an introduction, a body, and a conclusion? And it's a very good idea to ask a friend to read your letter and use the checklist just to make sure that you've covered all your bases. And that will actually give you better marks at the end because you are checking whether you have done everything that the question requires. Right, so here is a topic, possible topic for the informal letter. Your friend's small business has been affected by the recent protest and looting. He or she lost everything she worked hard for to grow the business in the past 10 years. Write a letter in which you comfort and encourage him or her to look into the future with hope. Right, so let's see. The instructions is it's a friend. The business that they have is in trouble because of the looting and the protests. And what is the purpose of the letter? To comfort and encourage him or her to look into the future with hope. In other words, not to lose hope in possibly getting back where he was before. Right, I want you to do the planning for a friendly letter. Remember your address. Remember, this is just a planning. Remember your address. You may use a mind map, flow chart, or notes to do your planning. Remember what we did in the previous session with the essay. I showed you the different kinds of planning that you can do. You do planning that works for you, which helps your brain to actually focus and organize itself. Keep the requirements in mind, the devastation of the protests or the looting. You have to give words of comfort and encouragement, and you have 8 minutes for that. Right, so how did that go? I actually challenge you to try and finish that letter in your own time and ask a friend to use a checklist. And if you want to, you can ask your teacher to help you to gauge where you are with your informal letter. Next up would be formal letters. And there are different kinds of formal letters, as you know. These days, we actually write a lot of emails. But remember that the structure should still be the same. In other words, the content is the same. So you can have a letter of application. You're most definitely going to use that at some point in your life. You are going to write a letter of thanks sometime, or a letter of complaint when you're not happy with something, a letter of sympathy, a letter of request, or a letter to the press. Before you write your letter, you need to read the letter topic to which you need or want to respond very carefully. Actually, with all transactional texts, make sure that you analyze the question carefully. And you use that utilizing highlighters, or even if you underline it with different coloring pens, or just underline it so that you break open the question, and that actually makes it possible for you to know what you should respond to, specifically where formal letters are concerned. Then think about the tone of the letter you will write. Remember that you can't be aggressive even if you are upset. You have to be factual, to the point, expressing your thoughts and ideas and views without attacking someone. Identify your audience and the purpose in order to determine the type of letter that you will write. Very important. There are a couple of words here that stand out. The first one is tone. Tone is basically the language, the emotion that is associated with what you say. Very often it's not what you say, but how you say it. Right. So now, obviously, when you write a letter, they can't hear you, so they can't hear your tone. But they will know your tone by the words you choose in your letter. Identify your audience and the purpose of the letter. Audience is, who are you writing this to? Extremely important. Your letters will not be the same. Your choice of words won't be the same for different types of people, different audiences. Right, and then why are you writing this letter? And you need to make sure that you know. Think about and plan your response. If you fail to plan, you plan to fail. That is as easy as it is. So make sure where you want to go with that. Remember, a formal letter or a letter, any kind of formal letter is focused. You can't waste the reader's time. It must be focused. Let's take a look at the register and style. Now, register refers to the degree of formality. Now, obviously, if you write a letter of application, it's going to be more formal than when you write a letter to the press complaining about something. It must be acceptable for the audience and the purpose, the who you are writing it to and the why you are writing it. The letter should be clear and straightforward, concise and to the point, and it should also be logical. Let's take a look at style. Style refers to word choice, it refers to sentence structure, and to tone. Remember what I said? The words you choose will very often determine the tone that the reader reads into it. Write the letter in direct, simple English. Sometimes people use highfalutin words, in other words, those smart words that you hear on television or that you have read somewhere. And then you think, it will fit in here to be impressive. Unfortunately, a lot of the meaning goes down the drain if you use very interesting words in out of context. In other words, they don't suit there, they don't fit there. Avoid Yet again, slang and colloquial language. We've established what these are. Contractions, abbreviations, and acronyms. You cannot include unsubstantiated accusations, threats or emotional language, sarcasm. You can't use those because remember, this is formal. Let's take a look at the sender's address. Now, what's the main difference in format between the informal and the formal letter? Number one is in the formal letter, you will have two addresses. The first one is the sender's address, which is the person who writes the letter. So written just after the middle of the page on the right-hand side. The sender's address is set in a block format. In other words, they should fit nicely and snugly underneath one another. There should be no punctuation at the end of the lines. There should also be no abbreviations, same as with the informal letter, except for the PO box if the postal address is used. Use either a residential or a postal address, not both. The area postal code must be included. The date must be immediately added after the address and it must be written in full. The day comes first, then the month, and then the year. In other words, not the mathematical one, 2024/02/12, but 12 February 2024. Let's take a look at two possible senders addresses again. Remember, I said we are focusing on format because if you understand it and you study it and you get it now, you will never have to prepare for a formal or an informal letter ever again. You will remember it. It would be like riding a bike. You just get on and you go. Right, so it should either be a residential address, and that is when your post is delivered at your house. Okay, that is a residential address. You can't live in a post box. Or you can use a postal code or a post box address, and that would be if you fetch your mail from a post office. First of all, the recipient's address is written against the left-hand margin after a line is skipped. Now, a recipient is the person that you are writing the letter to or addressing the letter to. In the case of a letter of application, it might be the person that is mentioned in the advertisement, and you are responding to that. If it's a letter of complaint, it would be to either a newspaper or a magazine or it can be a municipality, it can be a doctor's office, whatever thing you are complaining about. But it has to be in the left-hand margin after a line has been skipped for the sender's address. No punctuation is allowed at the end of the lines. Again, the title, the manager, the principal, and then you start the recipient address. The name of the company follows immediately after, and no abbreviations is allowed in the address either. Use either a residential or a postal office address. Area postal code must be included. No date to be included in the recipient's address. In other words, you write your address, you add the date, but there's no date attached to the recipient's address. And there's a good example. Storm Street on the right, that is your address. To the left would be the Johannesburg Metro Municipality. That would be the recipient's address, the person that this letter is addressed to. How to remember the format? Let's take a look at that. To remember the format of the formal letter, think about a traffic officer directing traffic. The sender's address, top right corner is where the stop sign is, red for stop. You are not going anywhere and neither is the date going to change. Therefore, this is where you have to put these details. Red is for stop. Green is for go, where the letter is going to. That is where you write these details. Green is for go. Let's take a look at the salutation for the formal letter. Salutation follows on the left-hand side after a line has been skipped, and it's more formal. Dear sir or dear madam, please do not write dear sir / madam. You either address the person as male or female. How do you know whether it's male or female? It doesn't really matter. You choose. If there's not a specific person indicated, you choose whether this person that you are addressing is male or female. That's your decision. But please don't include both. And then, very, very important, you are going to include a subject heading. And that is the second thing that is different between the formal and the informal letter or the friendly letter. In here, we have a subject heading. So after you've skipped a line, after the salutation, you write the subject heading. And the subject heading is a one-liner that summarizes the contents of the letter. In other words, the purpose of the letter. If you are writing a letter of application, it would be application for post as teacher, and underline it or write it in capital letters. It doesn't really matter which one you use. For example, complaint service delivery. That's a perfect example. You'll see that there's a colon used there as well. Let's take a look at the body of the letter. Now remember, we said it must be concise, it must be clear, to the point. Paragraph 1, the reason for the letter. Very brief and to the point. Remember, you're not here to make friends. You're either here or you are writing this letter to address a problem or to introduce yourself in terms of a letter of application, for example. So very short, straightforward, to the point. Paragraph 2 expands the reason for writing the letter, and each aspect of the complaint needs to be mentioned and clearly explained with evidence. So it's methodical. Paragraph 3 would contain suggestions for improving the situation. And then the ending, the most commonly used ending is yours faithfully, an uppercase Y for your capital letter and an F in a smaller lowercase or a small letter. Sign your name, then print your name and title beneath it. And in this case, you will use both your name and your surname. Yours faithfully, R.L. Peterson, whatever the case may be. So let's take a quick look at a put together one. So you've got your address on the right, you've got the recipient's address on the left, the person the letter is addressed to. Then a line is skipped. Your salutation, dear sir, remember not sir/madam, you choose one. A line is skipped and then your topic sentence is included. Skip a line and then you have your 3 paragraphs. Paragraph 1, line open. Paragraph 2, line open. Paragraph 3, line open, and it ends with your ending. Yours faithfully, and then whatever. Remember, you sign and then you write your name and your surname or your initials and your name, whichever one you choose. A couple of useful sentences or useful phrases that you could possibly use in a letter of application would be in reply to your advertisement in, and then the paper's name, and then also the date in which this advertisement appeared in the newspaper. I would like to apply for the post of, and then you include what specific post you want to apply for, which was advertised in, and that would be the newspaper or the magazine or whatever you are talking to on, and you add the date. I wish to apply for admission to, or please, as requested, find enclosed letters of reference from. Those are all possible phrases that you can use. I am however many years old. My qualifications are as follows, and then you list your qualifications. In whatever I graduated from, where I majored in that, and that would be somebody who studied now. I'm available to attend an interview at a convenient time for you. The next one would be a letter of inquiry. I'm interested, or I wish to learn more about. These are all phrases that you could use. I would be most grateful if you could supply me with the following information. Not give me the following information, but supply me. It's a nice word, that. I would like to get a description of, and then whatever. Do you supply? Does it include dinner, equipment, activities? Remember, these are just examples. What is the price of that per day or per week? Let's say you want to go on holiday and you write a letter of inquiry. I would appreciate it if you could, and whatever you'd like to ask the person, kindly respond to. Then we get the letter of complaint. Now, this is a common one that's very often used. I wish to draw your attention to, or you could also say, I would suggest that. So I wish to draw your attention to could be in the introductory paragraph. And I would suggest that could be in the third paragraph. You see how you can use it across. I suggest that immediate steps be taken to. Now, the vocabulary, the words chosen in this phrase is very important, because you could just as well have said, you must do something very quickly about this problem. That sounds like an attack. But if you say, I suggest, remember, that immediate steps be taken to, it pacifies it. In other words, it removes it, so it's not confrontational. And that is something that you don't want. I wish to complain about, or you could also say, I look forward to a prompt reply. Prompt is a quick reply or a quick response, and hope that you will take into consideration, and whatever you'd like to add there. I'm really dissatisfied with, it's such a nice word, dissatisfied. And as with the informal letter, there is a checklist that you can use, or you can ask your friend to check yours for you, whether you've covered everything that needed to be covered. Right, so in the next activity, and we don't have as much time to go through all the activities, but this is an example of the formal letter from the 2021 Senior Certificate exam. Some members of your community would like to learn how to read. They have approached you for assistance. You have decided to make a request to a literacy organization to provide readings lessons for these community members. Write a letter of request, you're asking, to the manager, so you know who it should be addressed to, of the literacy organization. And here you must be specific. You can't say at your literacy organization. You choose one, create one, and that is where the creative writing comes in. And provide reasons why these community members should be given reading lessons. The body of your response should be between 120 and 150 words in length. Now it's your turn. Plan the body of your letter using a mind map, flow chart, or notes. You have 3 minutes. Right, we're back. And how did you find this activity? Was it easier for you now that we've highlighted or changed the color of the instructions, the purpose, and the person that it is addressed to? It just helps you to focus to know exactly what you need to respond to. The next one we are going to refer to is the obituary, and I'm sure that you have just about done it. If I look at the ATP, the obituary was one of the topics that you had to cover in the last week or two. Now, an obituary is a notice of the passing of someone known by the target audience. It also includes the cause of death as well as funeral arrangements. Now, in this case, there are a number of things that you have to cover, and you have to be very careful that you cover everything properly. Let's take a look at the features of an obituary. The following must be included. Number one, the full name of the deceased, full names and the surname. Then the date of birth, the place of birth, the date of death, place where she lived before his death. The key survivors need to be mentioned, and there should be a relevant tribute. Date and time and place of the funeral. Those things should all be there. So how do we write an obituary? Read the question carefully. Determine who the person is that has passed away and how you are related to the person. Paragraph 1, include the personal details of the person that has passed on, full name and surname, date of birth written out in words, again, date of death written out in words. In other words, not the mathematical 2024/02/12, but 12 February 2024. Date of death written out in words, and then where the person was living at the time of his or her death. The name of the organization that writes the obituary, for example, the church, a team, community, a group. Now, this is an example of an obituary. We have lost a brilliant and selfless leader who left a legacy second to none in, and then the full name and surname. He was born on, the full date, at, and that's where the person was born. He moved to where the person was living at the time of death, and also the year where he passed on, and that would include your date of death. He will be sorely and dearly missed by, and then whoever he will be missed by, the organization that sends the tribute. And that could be a family. How to write an obituary again. It goes on paragraph 2. You write the tribute to the person. So the previous was paragraph 1. Paragraph 2, a tribute to the person. What should be included there? It is something that you say to show that you respect and admire someone or something. So what is the focus of your tribute? Start off by describing how you are related to the deceased. Describe the traits of the deceased which made an impression and how this person changed the lives of the people he or she came into contact with. Refer to all the good things he has done and how these actions benefited others. For example, although our family shall miss a quality leader, death should not be proud. His untimely death has also set us back, as it has robbed us of a really considerate, selfless, and dedicated leader who had always put others first. He possessed mentoring skills that benefited everyone who worked closely with him. He was patient and made friends with all the people he engaged with. Paragraph 3 would refer to the people left behind, and here you can name them. Include the date, time, and place of the funeral. Very important. And then you can add last words of condolences. May his soul rest in peace, or whatever you include. He is survived by, and then mentions all the names of the closest family members. He will be laid to rest on, and that would be the date, time, and venue. It's also a euphemistic form of he will be buried. It is our wish to express our desire to the Almighty God through our sincere prayer, heals and consoles the family members who have experienced the sad and solemn event. May his soul rest in peace. And that's that finishing condolences part. Yet again, there's a checklist for the obituary. Very important, especially with the obituary, that someone checks whether you've included all the things that are necessary. What are necessary? Let's go through them again. Number 1, the full name of the deceased, the person that passed away, the date and place of birth, the date of death, where the person was living at the time of death, key survivors and their names, a small tribute, and then the date, time, and place of the burial. Here is an example of an obituary. Your teacher has passed on due to COVID-related symptoms. As the secretary of your school's representative council of learners, or the RCL in short, your principal has asked you to write an obituary. Write an obituary in which you also pay tribute to him. Very important, the body of your response should be between 120 and 150 words in length. Use the checklist to make sure that you've included all the information. Now we are moving over to the dialogue. A dialogue is a conversation between 2 or more people. It is a record of the exchanges as they occur directly from the speaker's point of view. An interview, on the other hand, is similar to a dialogue, but the major difference is that in an interview, the one speaker probes the other by asking questions, while in a dialogue, the speakers engage in a conversation. So just make sure that you can distinguish between the two. When you write a dialogue or an interview, write the names of the characters on the left side of the page. Use a colon after the name of the character who is speaking. Use a new line to indicate each speaker. That is very important. Remember, this is not a paragraph, so it has to be nicely put together, and this is what we refer to as format. Avoid using long greetings and introductions. Respond to the brief in the question. Yet again, that reference to, hey, how's it? How is the family doing? That is not part of the topic. You jump into the topic directly. Stage directions must be given in brackets before the words are spoken. Stage directions is what should the actor do. He should jump up and down, or he should turn to his left, or he should fold his arms. Right, that is the actions. Sketch a scenario before you start writing. In other words, as an introduction, where is it taking place, what is taking place, who are involved. Okay, that's very important. Right, Sipho and Peter have not completed their homework. They are standing behind a tree thinking of bunking a class. Sipho says, have you done your English homework? I've nearly really forgotten to do it. Peter says, be quiet, someone will hear you. No, I have not done mine either. I think we should bunk the English period. This tree will be a wonderful hiding spot. Bunk class. My answer is no. I made my bed, so I must lie in it. Peter says, I hate it when you throw idioms at me. That is what you need, the English class. Come, man, we will face our dearest teacher together. Right, just a quick check again. Difference between a dialogue and an interview. The dialogue has two or more speakers and they are physically conversing. They are busy in a conversation. As opposed to the interview where the one character is the one asking questions and the other one answers the questions. Yet again, a very good checklist that you could use. Refer to the scenario, a brief context provided at the beginning of the dialogue, names of the characters on the left-hand side, a colon used after the name of the characters who are speaking, a new line used to indicate each new speaker, stage directions given in brackets before the words are spoken, wherever they are necessary. Greetings and introduction is short and appropriate to the brief in the question. No inverted commas, those direct speech marks, please don't use them because they are replaced by the name of the character with a colon. And then absolutely no slang, no profanities. And it's very easy to want to write a dialogue with informal language because this is an informal setting. It's like a discussion. Refrain from using slang even here. Remember, it's still a formal situation. An exam is formal. Right, so the dialogue, a radio station is hosting a competition in search of a new presenter. One of your friends has good public speaking skills. You want to encourage him or her to enter this presenter search competition. So what is the instruction? Write the dialogue between you and your friend. You have 5 minutes to do the planning. Very important, the body of your response should be between 120 and 150 words in length. So your 5 minutes starts now. Right, so how does the dialogue go? Remember, this is only your planning, and the challenge still stands. I want you to finish it, practice, and then have a friend check to see whether you have covered all the bases. Now let's take a look at the weightings and rubrics. Now, right at the beginning, I said that your longer transactional will also be assessed by the use of a rubric. Longer transactional pieces will be assessed according to the following criteria. So that's what we're looking at. First of all, content, planning, and format. It's a whopping 60%, and the marks out of 30 will be 18. And then your language, style, and editing will be 40%, which gives you a total of 12. And that comes down to the total of 30. And this is what a rubric looks like. This is what your transactional rubric is all about. And you'll see that we cover different colors of the criteria. In other words, whether we think you've done this okay-ish, whether it's not so good, whether you have totally failed in answering the question, or your vocabulary is up to shambles. And we use the average column as our benchmark. In other words, we start from there. If you're better than that, then we move one step up. If you're doing a little worse than that, we move one step down. Get to know your rubric. And you will be given a rubric when you are writing your first creative task, your longer transactional. Use your rubric to check whether you have covered everything that needs to be covered, just to make double sure. Right, a couple of areas of concern. The instructions are not followed. And now the biggest challenge here is, when you get your paper and you get to section B and there's a friendly letter or a dialogue, those are the two first things you run for. But there's a trick. Yes, the formats are easy. It's straightforward. You know the structures well, but the topic might be a difficult one. So make sure that when you select the friendly letter or the dialogue, that you know exactly what is required and that you answer exactly what is required. Very often, learners lose marks because they think, let's do the friendly letter. We've been writing letters forever. And then the question is not answered. And then you get low marks. So make sure that you follow your instructions carefully. Number 2, exceeding the number of words required. As I said, we are not mathematicians, but we have a good idea of the length of a piece of writing, especially if you have to write 120 to 150 words. Make sure that you train your brain, you train yourself to keep within the limit of words, because the more you write, the more mistakes you make. That is the bottom line, and that is what we want to avoid. Handwriting is another difficult one. If your handwriting is too small or too light, it's difficult to read it, and that will make your marker negative. And it doesn't mean that you didn't write well. It just means that we can't read what you are writing. So please practice your handwriting. Make sure that the ink you use is clear. It's not that light blue. It's beautiful. It looks like a typewriter, but we can't read a word. And that actually it defies the objective. Right, so make sure that your handwriting is clear. Then very, very important, format. I can't emphasize that enough. If you just study the formats of each of these that we have gone through, you will be okay. But do it properly. It doesn't help that you kind of glance at the formats before you have to do a task or write an exam, and right after that, you forget it. This is something that you should identify and be able to use. So when you think about the friendly letter, one address, remember the date, left-hand side, salutation, introductory paragraph, main paragraphs, conclusion, and then your ending. Easy as pie. What's the difference between a formal and an informal letter? The formal letter has 2 addresses instead of 1, and there is a topic line that isn't present in the friendly letter. So make sure that you know your format, because then you have one half the competition already. Limited vocabulary, which leads to the inability to understand the topics. Now I'm actually talking to grade 12 learners. Remember when your grade 8 teacher said you have to read and read and read? Now, I think actually it started in grade 4 already. You must read, because by reading you actually get a feel for the language, and then you build your vocabulary. Vocabulary building is not something that you can study and crash course the night before you write. You need to know exactly, and you need to become comfortable with words. And how do you do that? By reading a lot. And I'm not talking about reading novels. I am talking about reading the instruction pages in your medicine, or reading the instructions on the back of the cereal box. Or if your mom buys those packets of quick cupcake mixes, read the instructions. That's reading. Become aware of what's happening around you. Look at billboards. Check out the newspaper. I know very often moms and dads read the newspapers, but teenagers think it's totally terrible to read the newspaper. Get a hold of that newspaper. And you can even read the cartoons, because it is a learning curve. Just read whatever you can. And that will increase your vocabulary, which means you go into a task or a test with more weapons in your arsenal than before. I just referred to the fact that reading does not equal novels. Very often we think, oh, stories are boring, I don't want to read them, and that's why you don't read. I get that. I also know that if you're a grade 12 learner, there's very little time to actually read, which is nonsense, by the way. You should make time to read, even if it's 10 minutes a day. But in general, I know you have lots of work to do, and everybody wants a piece of you, and your parents also want stuff at home to be done. So I know you're all busy. But look at a variety of text. That's what I was referring to before. So what should you be doing? Follow the instructions. Read the instructions and information page. Make sure that you know what is required. And then with every question, there's an instruction. Section B has an instruction paragraph or page. Section C has exactly the same. The word count may not be exceeded. I'm emphasizing that. Yet again, please don't number the words in the line on the right and then forget to erase it. You don't have to count them that meticulously. But try and keep within that. You know your handwriting. Usually the length of the longer transactional should be around a page, because that's about, if you have an average handwriting, you should be able to fit that in. Respond to the brief. Now, what we refer to here is respond to the instructions. Make sure that you analyze the question, you know what is required, you know what is the purpose of the letter or the obituary or whatever you are writing, and make sure that your target audience is reached. Who are you writing this for? Choose a topic that appeals to you. We cannot write about things we don't know much about. So make sure that you choose a topic that you know something about. And then, having said that, it's also extremely important that you have the vocabulary to describe it or discuss it or to include in it. Plan the response using a mind map, a flow chart, notes, whatever. I emphasize yet again, I think there's a lot of emphasis on mind maps, but I know very often people feel uncomfortable with them because they're kind of messy, actually. So if you are more organized and you want logical steps, then I would suggest something like a flow chart will work better for you. Keep the target audience in mind constantly. You can't write highfalutin words if you are writing to a teenager. But in the same way, you can't use informal language if you are writing a formal letter. Analyze the text, identify keywords, and stick to the guidelines given. Write legibly. Pay attention to spelling, punctuation, etc. And here is where the proofreading and editing comes in. Edit the writing piece thoroughly. Check it at least 3 times. Do you see how important it is that you also include the proofreading and editing in the time that you're going to spend on that question? You can't just write and then not have time to edit. Editing is extremely important, and that is also, if you find that you've written too much, you can take out things here. You can draw a line through words or whatever, change it around a bit to have the number of words that is required. Always draw a line through all your rough drafts. It's the same as with the essays. If you have planned and you wrote a first draft or a rough draft, that would be your first attempt, and you want to do your editing and you write it over in a final, just make sure that you draw a line through the planning. The draft must be edited so that it does not look like an identical, neat copy. Very often, people write a first draft and a final, and then they look exactly the same. Errors copied included. Please don't do that. The purpose of a rough draft is for you to read it and then edit, change, adapt, and then write the final one. The formats for transactional writing pieces are still a problem, so study all the formats. For example, the letter to the editor, the dialogue, the speech, etc. Use the appropriate format for the different genres. You wouldn't believe how often candidates leave out the address in a letter. So it becomes like a glorified email. Unfortunately, it's still not an email and it's still not acceptable. And then you lose a lot of marks. What are you doing now? You are raking in marks to get the highest marks possible. And do something simple like just study a format and it will become second nature to you. Paper 3 carries the highest mark, in other words, 100. More time should be spent on learning creativity, practicing and improving writing skills and formats of transactional texts by using past papers to practice. And if I can give you a tip, you don't have to write a full transactional piece every time. Start off by planning. In other words, get the hang of it. It is a skill. It's not something that you learn, or it's not something that you are born with, It's something that you learn. It's something that becomes familiar the more you do it. So I would suggest do planning, do lots of plannings, and make sure that you are focused. And when you get to the big guns, when you get to your June exam, your prelim exam, and ultimately your finals, you wouldn't have to study very hard for paper 3, because those things will be ingrained in you already. Ladies and gentlemen, that is the end of the presentation. I trust that you've learned something. I trust that some of those past experiences have been brought back to you. Use the checklists, check each other's work, but practice often. It is something that comes with experience. It's not something that can be taught or learned in one single period. Thank you for watching this lesson. Please remember to stay safe. Please be dedicated from day one. Don't fall behind. See you next time. Goodbye.